whole thing started with just a simple story that one of my colleagues, James Robertson in Sydney, broke, whereby a couple of cabinet ministers had misused taxpayer funds to travel to the wedding of a shock jock in Sydney. He, did his story and they paid back their funds. We decided to have a pretty deep look at expenses across the board. So there's a bunch of links on government website where you can go in and painstakingly go through months of these expenses. They're broken out into 6-month periods. As you can imagine, it's an extraordinarily time-consuming process. So we thought this actually might be a good one to get our readers involved in, because I was getting emails and people contacting me on Twitter saying, I was actually looking at my local MP and what's he doing up in Margaret River when his electorate's in Sydney, what's the electorate business going on there? So there were all these people who were actually naturally interested, and we thought, well, let's formalise that interest. So we created a page and a sort of a call for help from our readers, and we made it very easy for them to go into these databases, look at everything, and then if they found something that sort of, piqued their interest, they could email us. We had a specific email set up for this, and we got hundreds of people writing in. A lot of it was utter, nonsense and, rabbit holes that you sort of got half a centimetre down and decided you'd get quickly out of it. But a lot of it was actually very good work. And there were a few readers who did, what I consider to be pretty outstanding investigative journalism, certainly, of a professional standard. They'd gone right in, they'd found discrepancies, they'd lined things up, and they'd packaged it for us. So, obviously, this saved us a certain amount of legwork because they found the break in quite a few of these instances. Now, we of course had to do what every journalist does, which is rigorously test everything that they've done. You don't just run off with citizen journalism, but that first, let's call it the first 20%, where you actually find what looks suspicious, is a huge part of the job. And really, there are probably 3 or 4 stories which we owe almost entirely to our readers. So it was quite a good experience. We ran a series of stories for about, it must have been 2 months last year, that culminated in Tony Abbott, changing the regulations around government MPs and how they use their entitlements. So it put a reasonable amount of pressure on the government.
Investigative journalists said, we think we can, we want to get the MP special, their interests, so where they've got property or in shares and, what clubs and all that they're members of and gifts they've received over a certain value. And that's just, it's kind of a report that gets farmed out. I think it's once or twice a year. And let's actually crunch that down. Let's put it up. Let's enable the reader to search it for themselves, and then email us with any odd things that they found and all that. So that was a great project, and that was the first time that we really pulled together the journalists working with the developer, such as myself. And then, interestingly, things like graphic design, getting a graphic design to say, well, how is this going to look? How's this going to feel? And not focusing on the sort of way it's going to look on a page, like in a print page, but actually on a live website where people might be coming to this every day, and we've got to think about usability issues and all this kind of stuff. So this multidisciplinary approach. So that was a great project, and I was really proud to work on it. And I was really pleased that it won what it did, and that the journalists behind it got recognised for it. And I thought that was a great moment for us. And then from there, it's just can we keep the ball rolling? So one of the things is, once you start doing projects like this, getting the first dozen stories out is almost first few stories out is a no-brainer. But how often are we going to refresh the data to keep it current? How long are we going to keep the story alive for? So there's this new dimension. If you go to the public with the data, you're kind of obliged to keep the data up and updated. So that adds this other sort of dimension to it as well. and that's quite different to the sort of fire and forget. Once a story's written and edited and published, it's kind of done. There might be follow-up stories, but it's not living. Whereas a lot of data journalism has the opportunity or the chance to live well beyond even what the journalist thought its shelf life would be. And so, yeah, it's quite interesting when you start looking at how long will a story live for.